Hello, good evening. Welcome to this series of a continuing series of talks on Singaporean art. And today we're going to continue with contemporary ink painting, right? And the last in the series is on contemporary art, right? That will be next month. Right. Now, actually, we use the term contemporary ink painting, mainly to refer to the context here in Singapore, right? Because in places like China, right, really ink has gone beyond painting. Okay, so it's quite fashionable today to call it simply contemporary ink, because it has gone beyond painting. It has even gone beyond ink. It has gone beyond the brush. Okay, I'll discuss this, as we go along. I suppose all of you are acquainted with, what traditional Chinese painting is and its materials, maybe also its methods, right? So what we call the four treasures of the scholar's library, right? So you have the brush, the ink, inkstone, and the rice paper, right? And those are the formats, the usual formats of Chinese painting. Right, you have the album, of course the hanging scroll, and then the vertical scroll, right? So these are the, so what I'm trying to say is that, Chinese painting, there's a constancy, right? For, thousands of years, right? There's a constancy, and it follows a certain tradition, a certain convention, right? And a certain formula. Right? Of course, within those hundreds or thousands of years, there have always been periods of what you call creative rebelliousness, right? Where, artists have also rebelled within this tradition. Okay, so for example, in Song, China, right, you have this movement called the Chan Buddhist painting. And Chan Buddhist painting was very different from very traditional painting, where it was influenced by Chan or Zen Buddhism. Okay, and artists, painted with spontaneity and directness of expression, because it was believed by these practitioners that, painting in a very quick, spontaneous way was a means of gaining enlightenment. Okay, so that was the Song dynasty, right? And of course, later I'm going to talk about the Qing dynasty, where you have this group of artists called the individualists. Right, Bata Shenren and Shi Tao and people like that, who actually exerted an important influence on 20th century, right, and 21st century ink painting. So these are the types of traditional Chinese painting. Essentially there were two schools. You have the court painters. The court painters were those attached to the emperor, to the court. They painted mainly realistic works. Like they are known also as the so-called the flower and bird painters. Right. They painted flowers, birds in a very detailed manner. Right. And then you have also another school called the Literati school. Now the Literati school were they produced paintings done by scholar officials, who really wanted to for them, a piece of painting is like a poetry, all right? They, instead of imitating nature, all right, painting to them was a means, a vehicle of personal expression, right? But even then, although there were many styles within this tradition, yet, artists followed a certain formula, right? And, they didn't really make, radical departures, right, from the formula. So, in a Chinese, even a landscape tradition like this, a very famous work by Shen Zhou, Poet on a Cliff Top, you would have the obligatory elements, like mountains, right, the subsidiary peaks, and then you have, sometimes a pavilion, a temple, right, clouds, right, and and vegetation, etc. Right. So this is a film, and also in the Chinese landscape tradition, figures are, human beings do not play a big role in it. Okay, because man is just, considered to be an insignificant part of this, larger cosmos of things, right? This larger kind of macrocosm, right, of life, all right? Okay, but this is a very poetic, work, all right? And you see the figure on top carrying a staff, and that is probably the artist himself, right? Standing beneath a cloud, right? Projecting his thoughts, okay? And that thoughts are expressed in that calligraphy. And again, talking about calligraphy, calligraphy has always been closely aligned with, Chinese ink painting, right? Okay, and calligraphy, of course, was used to as commentary on the work itself, as an opportunity for the artist to, to show off his calligraphic skills, right? To pen a poem, all right? So calligraphy itself, the calligraphic line, okay, is something that is essential to Chinese painting. Right? So to be a painter, you also need to master, right, the art of calligraphy, right? So that's the traditional thinking about Chinese painting. Now this is a quote by Su Dongpo, right, a Song poet. Okay, and he says, judging a picture by physical likeness is being juvenile, and a true poet does not permit his writing to be restricted by the rules of poetry. Right? Okay, I think this quote, right, even though it was penned during the Song dynasty, is so applicable today, right? And applicable to how contemporary ink painters work. Okay, where they and copying the work of a master, okay, was thought to be an essential feature again of Chinese ink painting. Okay, you learn by copying, okay, right, the work of a master, right? So, and you learn by also imitating sometimes, what you see. Okay, but contemporary ink artists, right, they try to go beyond that, physical appearance of things. Okay, and also to break this burden of tradition. Okay, what Su Dongpo calls here the rules of poetry. Okay, so in painting you can call it the rules, the burden of tradition. Now, what is contemporary about contemporary ink or Chinese ink? Okay, I suppose things have changed a lot, after from the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, and I think it's because of the introduction of Western art. Okay, in particular abstract art. Okay, which had really modernized, the Chinese ink tradition. Right? Because in 1919 there was this movement called the May 4th movement, all right, and and as a result of the May 4th movement, Chinese artists went to Western countries, okay, to study art, and when they came back to China, right, and that's where they try to fuse, right, both the Chinese and Western tradition in their works, okay. Right, so really the modernization of Chinese ink painting really took place, from about the early 20th century, right? Okay, and of course, during the contemporary period, okay, we are talking about the 1970s and beyond, where contemporary art, has its own kind of ethos, right, where it valued things like diversity and pluralism. Okay, as such, you have artists experimenting, right, with within the Chinese ink tradition. Okay, and coming up with even more kind of innovative, right, forms and and works. Okay, and now recently, you know, there's been a spate of exhibitions, okay, on contemporary Chinese ink. You know, in 2010, 2010, right, there was an exhibition organized by the Museum of Fine Arts, okay, Boston, okay, called Fresh Ink. Okay, and the Met recently only, you know, just I think last year and it ended this year, okay, organized this, I would say quite an important show called Ink Art. Okay, past as present in contemporary China, right? And if you were to get that book, it's available, right, this book. Okay, the book, of course, you know, is connected with the exhibition, right? You'll find that, you know, ink, right, really, I mean, has really crossed media, right? Okay, it's no longer just confined to painting. Okay, I'll show you some examples, right? And in the market, right, in the auction kind of circuit, right, I would say that contemporary Chinese ink, okay, has emerged as the next big thing, right? Although you know, I mean, perhaps Western audience is still not quite used to, you know, seeing such works, okay, but I think, you know, it will be the next big thing, right, in the next few, maybe, you know, in the coming years. And I just got, you know, this email from Tang Ling Na. Tang Ling Na, of course, is one of our, you know, Singapore's contemporary artists, you know, and I don't know how familiar you are with her work, but she paints on the right, you know, mainly this type of works in charcoal, okay, mainly what you call architectural spaces, okay, where she will paint, you know, mainly the, you know, those spaces where, you know, which are devoid of human inhabitants. All right. Okay, so there's a certain aesthetic to her work. Okay, I mean, you know, using charcoal. And in fact, she told me that, you know, she's going to Shanghai to participate in this, right, in this exhibition called On-Site Cross-Contextual Ink Art. And that's what she said in you know, I just want to quote her, right, in the email to me. You know, she said that, okay, I'm creating an on-site drawing using my charcoal, but will turn it into ink as well. So that's quite interesting, right? Both charcoal and ink have the same base, right? So she makes quite an important point here, right? And hope to create ink work with different perspectives, right? So she, you know, artists like her, you know, are, I suppose, pushing the boundaries, right, of what ink can do, okay? And it's good to see her pushing the boundary, right? Because, you know, for a long time she's been painting works like this. Okay, and many of her works are site-specific, okay? Right, she'll paint on the wall, for example, right, of a certain space. Right, so the term, you know, pi mo, right, pi mo means brush and ink. Okay, as I mentioned, brush and ink have been integral, essential to Chinese painting. Okay, and not only Chinese painting, but calligraphy. Right? But this ink painting tradition, as I mentioned earlier, was challenged by new media and practices introduced from the West in the early 20th century. Right? Modern Western art, abstract art, okay, have really, you know, changed the nature of Chinese ink painting. Right? So this led to a division between Guohua, meaning Chinese style painting, and Xihua, Western style painting. Okay, and sometimes what happened was that in the 20th century, some artists began to synthesize these two styles, okay, fuse them. And perhaps one of the best known artists to do that, right, is this artist called Wu Guanzhong, right, Wu Guanzhong, okay, right, Wu Guanzhong, I suppose, you know, his style sort of fused, right, the two traditions, right. But, you know, since the 1980s, as I said, you know, from the contemporary period onwards, you'll see that a new globalized art form emerged, okay, which is not bound by these two categories. Okay, so artists have really gone beyond this category, and this is known as experimental ink painting. Okay, maybe I would even leave out the painting. Okay, it's just contemporary ink, right? Okay, so so there are two tendencies within this new art form of contemporary ink. Right, so you have practitioners who make references to Western models while retaining the use of traditional Chinese materials. All right, so that's one. And some artists still continue to do this. Okay, later on we'll look at some of these local artists who do this, who continue to make references to Western models while remaining respectful, okay, right, of Chinese models. And then you have the second tendency, right? Artists who abandon Chinese techniques and formats altogether, right, to experiment with new media and postmodern strategies. Okay, but however, right, maybe I'll just go on. So I suppose I spoke about the two tendencies. So you have one tendency, artists who continue to link the past and present, okay, tradition and modernity, right? And there's still an adherence, sorry, there's a repeated word there, right, to the beauty and discipline of calligraphy and ink painting, right? But there have others, right? There are others who sort of abandon the traditional format, all right, and they kind of reinterpret, reinvent, okay, traditional forms to appeal to a more global audience, right? So we'll see some examples. Right, so you have these artists who go beyond the brush, the ink, and the paper. Okay, so that's why I say it's a bit tricky to call it contemporary Chinese painting, right? Or contemporary ink painting. It's really contemporary ink today, or contemporary Chinese ink. Or not even ink, perhaps. But again, there's a question of, have we pushed these definitions a bit too far, right? Okay, are we using it too loosely, right? Remember in my last talk on sculpture, right? Okay, I spoke about the expanded, how the definition of sculpture has expanded, to include even forms which traditionally we recognize as sculpture, right? So, for example, found objects, can those be regarded as sculpture? Okay, and these artists who have gone beyond working with ink as a primary medium created works which can be defined as what you call having an ink aesthetic. Right? And what one artist calls the ink and wash spirit, okay, I'm not sure what it really means, but it's really having the feel and look of ink or Chinese ink. Okay, having a kind of character and flavor of Chinese ink, all right, that kind of ink aesthetic. Okay, again, as I said, it's a bit tricky, right? Can you claim everything that has, for example, I saw a work at Singapore Museum yesterday, right, in this exhibition called Unearthed, and there was Han Sai-Po's work, okay, and she created that work when she was in STPI, Singapore Tyler Print Institute, okay, and the label described it as, well, this work probably owes, something to the Chinese ink tradition, because it has, the kind of contrast of black and white, and then also the contrast of negative and positive spaces, okay, but again, as I said, is it pushing this too far, okay? But we don't know, I mean, we can say that work has a certain ink aesthetic, right, in which it owes its, aesthetics to that tradition. You can see the third point, artists who work with various materials, various media, okay, oils, acrylic. Okay, so even artists who work with oil, you can see that somehow the line work and all that, right, the way they blend the colors, owe something to the Chinese tradition, right? Okay, video performance is a bit more tricky, right? How do you, detect the ink aesthetic within, a video work, for example, okay, or even an installation work, right? Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, but nonetheless, whatever media that, Chinese, or rather artists use, okay, whether it's performance, video, right, you can see that, I suppose you can say that their works, they still work within the Chinese tradition in the sense that their works embody the kind of aesthetic choices, stylistic references, and philosophical concepts that are indelibly linked to China's past. Okay, I have an example. Okay, I'll be talking about that, right? Okay, so you can say that contemporary ink artists create their own visual vocabulary to capture the soul of ink. Okay, what that artist said, the spirit, okay, of ink and wash, the soul of ink, okay, and to liberate it from its medium, right? Okay, so let's have an example, some examples of this. Zhang Huan, right? Better? Yeah. Okay. Now, Zhang Wan was an artist who emerged, right? Or who was one of the artists who worked in what they call the East Village in Beijing, you know. And the East Village in Beijing was, you know, this group of artists were quite radical, right, in the way they approached performance art. Okay, they even, you know, were doing works, you know, performances that, you know, test the limits, the physical limits of the body. Okay, I won't go too much into detail, but Zhang Wan was definitely one of them. Okay, and then after that he went, I believe, to America to work for a while. I'm not sure whether he's back in China. Okay, but he always creates these very powerful, very provocative works. Okay, this is one of them. Okay, Family Tree. I believe it was shown in that exhibition, right, at the Met. Okay, and this is a performance captured in 9 photographs. All right, so here you have what Zhang Wan did was that he engaged three calligraphers to write words on his face, and it took them from morning to night. Okay, and they wrote like words, names, and stories connected to China's cultural heritage. Okay, and one of those words are actually words linked to what they call physiognomy, you know, reading of faces. Okay, where you know it's believed that a person's face can tell you a bit more about a person's character, even fate. It's a kind of divination, I suppose. Okay, so what they do is that as they write, you know, eventually his whole face will be covered with ink, right? So it's no longer now to read his face anymore, right? Even if you're you know, in Chinese physiognomy, you know, you have to look at the face and read it. But here, you know, he has covered it with ink, so much so that you can't, okay, read his face, and as a result, you know, you also cannot tell his cultural identity anymore. Okay, so here in this work, he's also exploiting, okay, or exploring notions of cultural identity, right, in this work. Okay, so as you can see, you know, it works like this, right? Does it have an ink aesthetic? Yes, you can argue it does, because, you know, these are you know, this is a form of calligraphy, I suppose. Okay, only thing the you know, it's not using rice paper, but here it's using, right, the artist's face, right? Okay. Anyone knows about Chai Guoqiang? Okay, the the gunpowder artist, right? Okay, and he uses gunpowder, real gunpowder, in his works. Okay, and these works are known as events. You know, he will stage these events, you know, where there's this you know, violent explosion, right? And then you know, I mean, the events actually vary in scale. Okay, so like a work like this, he would you know, I mean, there will be an explosion, and then you have the traces of the gunpowder explosion. Okay, and he was you know, encouraged to do this work because of the 9/11, okay, incident, right? Okay, so this work talked a little bit about violence as well, right? Okay, and when asked why he wanted to make such violent explosions beautiful, he said that, well, he's working like an alchemy. You know, he's trying to use poison against poison to turn dirt into gold, right? And actually, the results are quite surprisingly, you know, quite beautiful, right? You can see that, and you know, and okay, before going to the work, you can, you know, Chai Guoqiang makes a lot of references. You know, he's an artist who have left China for more than 20 years. He was born in China, now based and live in New York. Okay, but he still makes references to his Chinese heritage, right? He makes references to Chinese medicine and philosophy, and of course, gunpowder was a Chinese invention, right? And he makes, as I just mentioned, references also to alchemy. All right. Okay, but the result itself, if you look at it, okay, you know, it's not far. We cannot say that it's the aesthetic itself, right? The flavor of it, you know, is we can see that we can sense the Chinese aesthetic here in this work, right? Okay, you know, the ink washes that Chinese painters use, right? The ink, right? The dense ink, right? The darker areas represent the dense ink, right? So there's a kind of a look and feel, right, of Chinese painting, right, even within this work, right? And sometimes the result can be said to represent some sort of natural disasters. You know, his works are sometimes interpreted as like tornadoes or, you know, earthquakes and all that, right? Okay, but there's a kind of, you know, there's a kind of a natural look to it, natural feel. Okay, not unlike how you would see a Chinese landscape painting, right? Maybe I'm going too far, I don't know, right? Okay, but you know, that's how you can look at this work. And of course, very famous artist, Gu Wenda, right? Okay, when you talk about, you know, really the pioneer of, one of the pioneering, you know, contemporary Chinese artists, Gu Wenda is one of them. Okay, and, you know, Gu Wenda's signature work, okay, is using the Chinese script or calligraphy. Okay, and I have to say, okay, many of these artists, okay, have grounding. They already have grounding in Chinese traditional ink and calligraphy. Okay, it's not that they didn't have, okay. All right, okay, some of them, Gu Wenda, you know, he trained in Chinese ink painting in the very prestigious academy. What's the academy called? Okay, never mind, it was a Chinese academy, right? Okay, and, but if you look at the script, they are really unreadable, right? Okay, because, you know, he created what you call these fake scripts. Okay, so his scripts are always forged, they are miswritten, modified, okay? So artists like him goes beyond the semantic quality of Chinese calligraphy, goes beyond the linguistic, you know, quality of calligraphy, right? So what you have now is that you know, you appreciate the kind of, I suppose even, but again you know, I suppose purists, you know, Chinese calligraphy purists would want you to understand what they write, okay, but here it's not necessary, okay, perhaps, you know, you just appreciate the beauty, the form of the characters, right? And another material used, can you see the caption? Human hair, right? And his works were shown at Esplanade some years ago, quite some time, more than 10 years ago, I believe, right? It's an installation work. And he collected that hair from all parts of the world to create that work, right? But, you know, I mean, it's quite clever to use hair because the fine line of hair, again, we talk about line, and line, you know, the calligraphic line has been essential to Chinese ink tradition, right? If you look at the caption, right, this work, it can deceive you, right? You think that, wow, that's a Chinese ink painting. I don't blame you. Okay, it's a Chinese ink, I mean, it's a Chinese landscape painting. Okay, until you know how Yang Yongliang works. Okay, because he is famous for creating this sprawling photographic, you know, digitally manipulated collages. Okay, that makes a commentary on the, you know, the kind of the consequences of uncontrolled, the devastating effects of uncontrolled urbanization and industrialization. Right. So on, you know, on first look we think that, well, this is a Chinese landscape painting. But on closer look, if you look at the middle ground, you know, and you look at the far right, I mean the right hand side, okay, you begin to see factories, buildings, right, and machinery. Okay, so you know that, you know, this is not your typical, right, Chinese landscape painting. All right, and of course he uses, you know, the computer, okay, to digitally manipulate his images. Right? But again, as I said, coming back to the ink aesthetic, definitely. I mean, if you look at this work, you know, I mean, we cannot deny that it belongs to the aesthetic tradition of Chinese landscape painting, right? Okay, and you know, of course, you know, you can't deny the influence of modern Western abstract art, okay, on the thinking and concept of these contemporary and modern Chinese ink painters, okay, and in particular the works of the abstract expressionists, okay, because the abstract expressionists, you know, they created, you know, their works are very personal in a way because they rely on what you call the spontaneous gesture of the artist's hand. Okay, the line, you know, play an important role in their work. Okay, I mean, and in another school of abstract expressionist painters, you have artists who work with fields of color. Okay, and that also had an impact on modern and contemporary Chinese ink painting. All right. Okay, but at the same time, you look at the last point. Chinese calligraphy seemed to have influenced the works of Western artists such as Jackson Pollock and Yves Klein. Maybe not. okay, although many of these Western artists, they don't necessarily openly acknowledge that they were influenced by Chinese art or Chinese calligraphy. But if you look at their works, like Jackson Pollock's work, okay, where he placed the canvas on the floor, and then he would just use his, you know, a brush. It's not your painter's brush, you know, but it's an, you know, it's a trowel, it's a stick. Okay, he would dip it in paint and then just pour paint on the canvas. And that's the result. Okay, right? So it's a spontaneous gesture, you know, of the artist's hand that also expresses the inner spirit, you know, the personality of the artist. Right? Okay, but Pollock, I think, you know, never openly acknowledged that, you know, he was influenced by Chinese calligraphy or Chinese art. But if, oh, sorry, wrong. Oh, I didn't change the caption. Sorry, it should be Jackson Pollock painting number 2. Sorry. Okay, this is an artist called Franz Kline. Sorry, wrong caption. F-R-A-N-Z, Franz Kline, K-L-I-N-E. Okay, right. Franz Kline also belonged to the abstract expressionist, or what you call the New York School of Painting. Okay, and he's famous for these bold lines. Okay, these bold vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines. Okay, arranged in a kind of you know, architectural kind of composition, right? You know, and the line also, you know, has some gestural quality itself. Okay, and if Franz Kline, you know, did acknowledge that, you know, he was influenced by East Asian calligraphy, right? Okay, and many of these artists were also influenced by Zen Buddhism, right? Japanese Zen Buddhism. Okay, so yeah, surprisingly, I mean, you know, we don't always think of Western art as, you know, being influenced by Eastern art, you know, but you know, they do. Some of these artists, modern artists, were actually influenced by East Asian philosophy and even aesthetics. Okay, just for your, you know, your general knowledge, right? Okay, and we cannot, you know, when we talk about contemporary ink painting, the influence of Bata Shenren, right, or Chuta as his name, as you know, he's sometimes called, right? Now, who is this guy called, you know, Chuta or Bata Shenren? Okay, he belongs to a group of Qing dynasty painters called the Individualists. Okay, they are called the Individualists because really they departed from, you know, the Chinese ink tradition, right? And all of them have their own very eccentric, individualized styles. Okay, and as you know, the Qing dynasty succeeded the Ming. Okay, and Bata Shenren and, you know, some artists were actually Ming loyalists. In fact, he came from a princely family. Okay, so after the Qing took over, you know, many of them were very angry, right? They were, you know, disappointed, and many of them withdrew, right? Okay, to become recluse, you know, hermits, and some of them entered monkhood. Okay, like Bata Shenren, right? And so throughout their life, you know, they had this a lot of cynicism in them, a lot of anger and frustration. Okay, because of the new occupiers. Okay, so their art was a kind of a response to that, right? Okay, the Qing occupation of China, right? Another master is Xu Tao. Okay, Xu Tao. But I'm just going to focus on Bata Shenren, and they have, you know, they have a lot of influence on masters such as Qi Paishi, right, and Zhang Daqian, right? Okay, and some of their works can be considered to be minimalist, right? They painted sometimes with just a few simple strokes, or sometimes with just a single brush stroke. Okay, right? So their works have already been, you know, tended towards the abstract and also the expressive, right? Okay, and also oddities. You know what you'll find in Bata Shenren's work. Okay, but of course, if you know Bata Shenren, okay, have you all heard of him? No. If not, then he's a very interesting character in the history of Chinese painting. He's like the Van Gogh of Western art. Now, why do I say that? He's mentally deranged. Okay, right? So while working, he'll make like loud noises. You know, you'll hear weeping, you'll hear laughter, right? Okay, so it's not surprising that his work also seemed very odd, very strange. Okay, the way that he, you know, he, do the brush stroke, right, and all that. Okay, down to his subject. Okay, they all seem, very strange and very unfamiliar. Okay, and his birds and fish, for example, have strange eyes, right? Okay, but as I said, he's idolized by the wave of avant-garde contemporary Chinese ink painters, especially those in Singapore. And if you ask them who influenced them, and almost invariably, Bada Shenren, okay, will be mentioned as, right, one of those artists. Okay. Right, it says that his calligraphy, is in a wild draft, script. Okay, so it departs already from that, that traditional script. Okay, exceedingly remarkable and strange, and his painting did not recognize the limits and rules of other painters. Right. Okay, so this is, I'll show you his work. Oh, this is what Chen Wenxi says of Bada, our own, local pioneer Nanyang artist Chen Wenxi, okay, says of Bada Shenren. Okay, right, and of course he was himself influenced by Bada Shenren and considered him to be his mentor. Okay, and he says after 300 years, one can still feel his aloofness, his stubbornness, his tragic passion in this sparse but rich composition. Okay, I like the way he put it. Okay, his aloofness, his stubbornness, his cynicism, his anger, right? Okay, still comes across in his works. Like this, right? Fish, bird, rock, right? Okay, so this is something quite unprecedented in Chinese painting, right? In a whole painting, you would just have, for example, one fish swimming, right? And maybe a bird, and then you have this rather strange looking rock. Okay, right. So you can see as Chen Wenxi said, he's known for the sparseness of his composition, right? But yet, it's simple, but yet his work is so profound, in some ways. Okay, and I mean, there's always a kind of a sense of, you would say, humor in his work, I suppose. If you look at the strange eyes of his fish, okay, and he sometimes upsets the composition of how we come to expect of a composition, right? He inverts position. For example, the fish is supposed to be below the bird and the rock, but here he puts a fish on top of the bird and the rock. Okay, right? And another peculiarity of his in his painting, it can be seen in the rock there. Can you see this is not a result of my cropping off the picture, right? It's the original picture. You see the rock itself being cropped off at the edges. Now that is something quite, revolutionary in Chinese painting as well, right? Okay, so can you see his creativity, his innovative spirit, and why many artists look up, to Bada Shenren, and make tribute to him. Okay, like our own. Okay, I'm going to talk about Hong Juan in a while. Okay, Singaporean contemporary ink painter. Okay, this is his tribute to Bada Shenren. Okay, it's called Feeling of Bada. Right? Can you see that? Okay, the fish, right? A single fish. But of course, Hong Juan is also known for his, his writings in his work, calligraphy. Okay, and those are actually Chinese characters you see on your left. Okay, what seems to be like I don't know. Okay, like an obstacle for the fish. These are all calligraphic writings. Okay, very fine, calligraphic writings. Okay, but in the kind of the sparseness of composition, you can see that this work is trying to pay tribute to, right, to Bada Shenren. Okay, and also perhaps in the oddity of his composition, right. Okay, but I think on the whole it works quite well, right. There is a balanced composition, right. Okay, you see this wall of calligraphy on the left, and then horizontally you have the fish, the empty space on the right, right? So there's a kind of a balanced composition here. Okay, we're going to talk about Singapore now, right? Now, do you all know when contemporary ink painting emerged in Singapore? Any idea? Just give it a guess, you know, there's no wrong. Sorry? 80s, huh? I would say 80s is when, you know, many artists sort of, you know, took up this art form, all right? But when it emerged, actually can be pushed maybe 2 decades earlier, right? Okay. With the Nanyang artists, I think you're quite familiar with the Nanyang artists, right? We're all familiar because they, you know, information about them have been always circulating, recirculating, okay? You know, and that's the problem with sometimes the discourse in Singaporean art. Okay, we're always talking about the same artists, okay? So here he, okay, and I think he has his roots also in the establishment of NAFA. Okay, because what happened in NAFA is that, you know, NAFA teaches, you know, both Western and Chinese art. Okay, so you already allow artists, you know, who study in NAFA to think about synthesizing these two traditions, right? Okay, but as I said, it can be traced to, you know, the Nanyang style, okay, which was a synthesis of the Shanghai School of Painting and the School of Paris, meaning Western art like Cubism, you know, Fauvism, okay, even the Post-Impressionists with local subject matter, okay. And I just want to highlight two Nanyang artists who I would say, you know, were probably whose works have started this whole, you know, history of ink painting in Singapore, okay, because of the innovative spirit and the reworking of traditional models, okay, and that is Cheong Soo Ping and Chen Wen-si. Okay, first, okay, before that, if you read the quote by Chua Ek Kay, okay, I'm going to talk about Chua Ek Kay later, right? Okay, he says that, you know, he urged Singaporean artists not always to look to China, okay, but to work in the context here, right? To respond to our, you know, for example, he says, a multicultural context, right? And to create our own unique identity, okay? And, right, okay, so, but, you know, unlike China, you know, Singapore, okay, although they are contemporary ink painters, as I said, you know, they are quite a small group, right? I won't say that they are, you know, a big group. You know, unlike China, for example, you know, which has a recognized institution to validate and set the standards of ink painting, we don't have it here. Okay, so in Singapore, ink painters exercise their own autonomy, right? Okay, but what AK is saying is that, you know, Singaporean artists have to respond to their own social context, build their own identity. Okay, so I'm not sure whether we have achieved that. Okay, but you can see, I suppose to some extent, right? If you look at the works later on, you can see that they are quite different from those created by their Chinese counterparts, right? Okay. Okay, first, Chen Wen-si. Okay, you've heard of Chen Wen-si, right? His painting, of course, of the Gibbons, I think, appear on our $50 note, right? In case you don't notice. Yeah. Yes. If you take out your $50 note, right? Okay. But anyway, just a kind of an anecdote there, right? And of course, he's most famous for his painting of gibbons and monkeys, you know, animals, I would say, right? Because he actually kept a kind of mini zoo in his home. Okay, he actually had, I think, about half a dozen or more gibbons in his home. Squirrels, he kept peacocks, right? Okay, so very much influenced by nature and, you know, but very versatile artist as well. All right, in terms of subject matter, he could paint portraits as well, right? He did abstract works, okay? And you can see that, you know, of all the Nanyang artists, you know, he had the most kind of structural and analytical approach, right, to, you know, to forms, okay? And that can be seen, or that really owes much to his influence from the West, okay, notably Cubism, right? You know, Cubist painting, you know, is very analytical in its approach, right? Okay, and and I would say that Chen was, or Wen-si, you know, as is known affectionately, right? Okay, was the most successful in synthesizing Western and Chinese elements in his work, right? But you can see that his lines remain unmistakably Chinese, right? And he's really one of the first artists to think and work in an abstract idiom. Okay, so there are a number of works, okay, that were clearly influenced by Cubism. Okay, you'll see the kind of multiple perspectives, right? The kind of fragmentation that you'll see in Cubist work, right? But I want to show you just one work called Three Egrets Gather, right? Okay, I'm not sure if you can see the, unlike his more Cubist influenced work, okay, this one is maybe less noticeable in terms of his Western influence, but still I think that, the Western influence is there in the kind of the abstraction of this work, right? You can see that, he didn't seek out to paint the details of the egrets. Okay, in fact, when you first look at this work, okay, you don't notice the egrets at all. Okay, you'll notice, for example, the lines and and the tonalities and the ink, right? Okay, but it's only when you look harder, and even that, you'll find it hard to find a third egret, right? You can only see the two, right? Okay, because again, he has abstracted, right, the egrets to such an extent that they simply become an arrangement of of shape, right? Of form, okay, and of lines. Okay, it's just that, right? Okay, so it's really an attempt, okay, to abstract what he sees. Okay, not an attempt to imitate, right, what he sees, right? Okay, even that egret there, that takes up the whole length of the painting, I mean, he has reduced it, he has simplified it, right? Okay, to extent that, it simply becomes, reduced to a series of ink washes and lines, right? Okay. Oh, so that's what he says, Chairman See, on abstract art. Okay. Right, he says that abstract art is one of the most pure and absolute form of painting. Okay. Then, of course, you have Cheong Soo Ping. Okay. Now, this period, 1961 to 3. Okay, of course, again, this is not a lecture on Cheong Soo Ping. I just want to briefly touch on his period, 1961 to 3. Very important period because he traveled to Europe. Okay, and surprisingly, he's probably one of the earliest artists to receive that recognition in Europe. He exhibited 2 times, I think, in London, 1 time in Munich. Okay, and that trip to London set him on the path to abstract art, right? Okay, and he began to create a new visual language, a new form of expression. He began to purge colors from his work, okay, so that they simply become black and white, right? Okay, and that was to have a lot of influence not only on artists in Singapore, but also around the region, right? Okay, just want to show, just to this is, I mean, this work is untitled Abstract Landscape 4. Okay, I mean, I don't know whether even the landscape is, is visible here, but certainly, I mean, it's just a play of abstract, forms and ink washes, okay, and lines, right, which are probably suggestive of some sort of landscape, okay, but we are not very sure here. I mean, the whole kind of composition is quite ambiguous, right? Okay, so we see here is just a kind of, an arrangement of abstract elements in this painting. Okay, so you can see in 1962, this is 1962, and in a sense it's quite already, we see innovation, right, during this period. Okay, I'm going to highlight, for the rest of the lecture, 5 to 6 local, Singaporean ink painters. Okay. And of course, the talk cannot include, every single ink painter. Okay, but what I consider to be some of the most significant ink painters. Right. So the first one, of course, you have is Chua Ek Kay. Okay. I think Chua Ek Kay is so significant because he was one of the first, really to cross that east-west dichotomy in his painting. And one of the first to, if you can call it, contemporaneous, Chinese ink painting, right? I remember him as a man of humility, great humility. I don't know whether you have had a chance to meet AK, right? For a man who has achieved so much, but yet when you talk to him, you can certainly sense his humility and his kind of, his down-to-earth kind of personality. Okay, and unfortunately, he died, from cancer in 2008. Okay, he was diagnosed, I think, 4 years earlier. Right. So we have lost a great painter. I mean, he was only in his 60s, right? He was only in his 60s, right? And one can only imagine what he would have produced, if he had not passed away. Okay, because he was a tireless experimenter. I mean, you look at AK's work, he's always willing to experiment, okay, with different techniques, different styles, right? Even different media. Okay, and he studied under this quite, I won't say very, very famous, but quite an established artist, Fan Changtian, okay, and who fled to Singapore, I think, in the 1930s, right, to escape from the war in China. And Fan Changtian also has a quite important influence on local artists. Henry Chen, we're going to talk about, actually studied also under him. Okay, and AK also studied classical poetry writing under Pan Shou. Pan Shou, of course, is probably our most famous, okay, poet, calligrapher, right, Pan Shou. And as such, he's able to develop a good understanding of poetic sensibilities, complexity of calligraphic line and strokes, and also, the transcendental value, okay, of art, right? And he's also very informed by aesthetic theory and philosophy. Okay, and before going further, I have to say that, or maybe also I'm delighted or proud to say that he also studied in LaSalle in the 1980s, right? Okay, and I think, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that it was actually in LaSalle that, opened his eyes to contemporary art. Okay, and he was able to take his art into another direction. But of course, after LaSalle, he went to study in Tasmania, in Australia. And that also exposed him to other art forms like Aboriginal art, for example. Okay. Now, if you look at Chua's work, right, he, like Paul Cézanne, the post-impressionist artist, okay, he wants to go beneath the surface appearances to look at things, right? He wanted to investigate the structures of form. Okay, so his work was really a study of the formal structures of visual reality, right? Okay, and his work involved a process of selection and simplification. Okay, so he would just be very interested in a fragment of something, right? And he would then simplify it, right? So that's how he worked, right? And okay, and it was described by our art historian Samapati, as Chua's work involves a relationship between painting process and the veracity of subject matter. Okay, between, if you like, intuition and methodology, right? Okay, so he struck a balance between the two. Okay. If you look at his brushwork, right, his style is characterized by a very limited tonality and a very brusque and angular brushwork. Okay, and okay, I already mentioned that he was a tireless experimenter. For example, when he went to Indonesia, right, he was, he collaborated with this very famous Indonesian artist called Putu, P-U-T-U. Okay, and Putu introduced him to the spontaneity of applying pigment on the canvas, and that opened up the eyes of AK. Right, and when 4 years before his death, he was, I think he was doing a residency at STPI, okay, Tyler Print Institute, okay, and where he began to work with paper, okay, and he created this what they call paper pulp paintings, very innovative, and that resulted in his Lotus series. If you look at, there's still the catalog available, Chua AK's Lotus series, okay, where, you know, again, you know, he took another kind of innovative approach, right, to looking at, you know, in looking at his subject. I remember this very famous work of his called Song of Cicada, okay? But in that painting, you know, all you have are, you know, leaves, right, arranged in a rather sparse manner throughout the, you know, the paper. There's no sign of a cicada, okay, right? So it's, you know, that painting itself is very poetic in that sense, right? Okay, you can hear the, you know, right, the song, the cicada, but it's nowhere to be seen, right, within the, okay, the painting itself. Now this work itself, okay, Shop House and Van. Okay, of course, you know, I suppose his works contain varying degrees of abstraction. Okay, there are some works that are more abstract than others. Okay, but as I said, you know, his work involved, you know, a process of selection and simplification. Okay, so here he's very much interested in, you know, you can see, can you see the van? Okay, maybe now you can, right? But, you know, when you look at it the first time, perhaps you can't. Okay, I think here his interest is she's trying to formally integrate the shape of the facade of the building, right, and the van, right, into a kind of a formal unity in the work, right? Now, I don't know where the blue is, right? Actually, there's, oh, the blue, right? You can see some ink, blue ink pigment there, right? But you can see that he uses dense ink and colored pigment, okay, to, you know, to depict the angle, the recess and angled areas of the building, okay? And in terms of brushwork, he uses the wet and dry variety. Okay, both wet and dry brushworks are used, okay, to depict the texture and the condition, the material condition of the building. Okay, because Ecce was someone who is very interested in derelict buildings. Okay, he's very interested in trying to capture unusual viewpoints and angles, right? Okay, and this work, okay, that really has been so talked about. Okay, arguably, I would say his most famous work. Okay, the Yellow Door. Right, the Yellow Door. Now, it reminds me again of Van Gogh's work. Huh? Yellow Chair, right? Is it Yellow Chair? Yellow House, right? Okay, so here you have Yellow Door. Right? It's actually quite an ambitious and monumental work. Okay, in terms of its scale, right, and its imagery, right, it's actually about 1.8, 1.9 meters, okay, consisting of two hanging scrolls side by side, okay. So the way he displays is like a diptych, okay, a two-panel, you know, painting, which is again quite unusual, you know, in Chinese, you know, in a Chinese tradition, right, and then he was, conceptually, I think this work has also broken new grounds, you know, right? I mean, probably, I'm very sure that a lot of people were shocked, okay, when they saw this painting, right? Okay, this painting was first exhibited in La Salle itself. Okay, I think it was after he graduated, if I'm not mistaken, okay, at a group show, in a group show, okay? So what you have here is that motif of what looks like a door, okay, painted in kind of brownish yellow. Okay, I don't know how he did that. He probably poured paint on it, and then he used the brush, you know, to you know, kind of delineate the form. Okay, right, to become a kind of a portal or a doorway, right? Okay, and then surmounted on top of the door, you have two characters in red. Okay, which I think has no bearing at all with the door itself. Okay, and then on the right hand of the left scroll, right, you have some concentration of ink, okay, you know, that gives the effect of drip, right, ink. Okay, and then on the right is even more radical, right? You just have an empty, you know, space, and it's just two strokes. That's about it, right? Okay, but you can see a clear contrast, trying to make a clear contrast between, right, the left scroll and the right scroll, right? So again, you know, the one on the right, again, it brings us to Bada Shenren, okay? Right, remember the influence of Bada Shenren, right? Who normally, you know, just have a single kind of a motif in his work, right? Okay, whether he intended this work to be a metaphor or not, the door itself, okay, what's the significance of that work? Does it have a metaphorical significance? We don't know, right? Okay, I mean, it's up to you to interpret, okay? But what I'm saying is that this was really a groundbreaking work in breaking with the rules of established, you know, convention of Chinese ink painting, right? In fact, I forgot to mention that, you know, AK struggled a lot, you know, because he felt that, you know, when, you know, to break away from the Chinese ink tradition, he was betraying his tradition, right? So it caused him a lot of remorse as well, which he actually penned a poem, you know, right, to express a remorse, right? Okay, but eventually, you know, I mean, it's good that he, you know, he really broke away, right, from that tradition. Okay, but that they say is history, right? It's history. Oops, sorry. Okay, and then we have Henry Chen Ke-Shan. Okay, Henry Chen, and okay, and again, you know, if you look at Chen's work, he derived, okay, the inspiration for his work, you know, was derived from nature. Okay, because he kept a garden, right, in his house, right, and in the garden, you know, you have lotuses and other plants, you know, growing, right, and you have also peacocks roosting in his house. Okay, right, so he derived a lot of inspiration from that, right, especially his lotus series. Now, a bit of background. I mean, Chen Ke-Shan, you know, he studied what you call the Lingnan style of painting. Okay, but he also, as I mentioned, studied under Fang Changtian. So he had quite an illustrious, I would say, background as well, right? And another influence on his work is music. Okay, and his work is inspired by music, and you know, he fuses sound and color in his works. And often he would listen to music while he worked, right? Okay, and known for his experimental spirit, okay, and avant-garde approach, okay, to a traditional form, influenced by Western art, okay, like many of these contemporary ink painters, okay, but again, they are recontextualized, you know, in a contemporary idiom, okay, influenced by abstract expressionism. So, as I say, he's one of those artists who make references to Western models while working within the Chinese tradition. All right. So in Singapore, you see that artists are not so radical as, you know, those examples we see of Chinese artists. Okay, I can't find artists here working in other media other than painting. Right. So far, you know, the ink aesthetic has been confined, okay, mainly to painting. I may be mistaken, but you know, from what I've seen, okay, right, and his works are marked by stark simplicity and abstract purity, and evocative use of colors, right? So one thing when you look at Henry Chen's work is the use of colors, okay, the way he blends the colors, right, and all that. Okay, this is his Lotus series. Of course, he's most famous for his Lotus series. Okay, probably inspired by the lotuses he grew in his garden. Okay. So here again, can anyone see the lotus here again? Okay, maybe you could, well, you know, detect the form of the lotus. I don't know if you look hard enough. Okay, but suddenly we can see those black calligraphic lines. Those are like the stalks, perhaps, you know, right? Or tall grasses. I'm not sure, right? Okay, but what here you have is that you have a painting that has been dissolved, okay, distilled into abstract elements, okay, into just you know, lines, right, and also colored forms, right, and that's about it. But as I said, right, again, if you look at the overall aesthetic of the painting, okay, is very evocative, right, in terms of its use of colors, right, and even lines, okay, conveying certain moods and certain emotions. Okay, so we can appreciate at that level. Okay, so try not to see hard enough in the painting, right, and trying to look for the lotuses. Okay, likewise here, it's even more abstract. Okay, but it's called Lotus Studies, right? And Henry Chan, he liked to listen to this particular composer, Mahler, M-A-H-L-E-R. Okay, and he was inspired by Mahler's First Symphony. Okay, and he said that some of the paintings, I would say the softness of the soft colors of, of the painting, okay, can be said to make references to the light-hearted movements of Mahler's First Symphony. Okay, and the darker areas could represent the more dramatic aspects of Mahler's composition. Okay, so I suppose you can, when you look at Henry Chan's painting, you can see the kind of musical quality in his work, the cadences, the mood, the tones of the painting. Okay, like you will hear a piece of classical music, right? Okay, I think that's the way to describe it, right? Similar to Kandinsky, if you're familiar with Wassily Kandinsky's work, right? Western art. Okay, let's move on to Wong Keen. Anyone heard of Wong Keen here? You have, huh? Okay. Right. I mean, Wong Keen, I think until about, I would say, I'm not sure, 10 years ago, I would say not many people would have heard of Wong Keen. Until the Singapore Art Museum had that show on Wong Keen's retrospective, I believe. Because of the donation by Koh Xiao Chuan, if I'm not mistaken, right, the architect, right, to the Singapore Art Museum. Okay, and they donated quite a large number of Wong Keen's work. Okay, and that brought Wong Keen to the spotlight. Okay, but of course Wong Keen has been painting since the 60s. But the problem is that he spent a lot of time overseas. So that was a problem as well. Okay, so it's good that we rediscovered a painter like Wong Keen. Right? And of course today he's relatively well known. Okay, not known enough, but enough, I would say, then compared to maybe 10 years ago. Okay, and Wong Keen's work always have been a fusion of Chinese calligraphy, okay, and what you call the New York School of Painting, abstract expressionism. Okay, that's because he lived in New York, right, and he was influenced by what he saw there. Okay, and this was to form the basis of his own distinctive visual language, right? And as Roy Moyer, right, says, his art spans two worlds, two philosophies. Okay, right, and okay, so he was familiar with the fluid expressive quality of ink calligraphy. Okay, and also and that also, I think, is an important kind of point of entry into American abstract art. Okay, and in his work you could see the bold, dynamic, gestural brushstrokes, right? Okay, the fluid calligraphic lines as well. Okay, and also the bold abstraction derived from color field painting, right? Okay, and so you have in Wong Keen's work, you have the lines, unmistakable the lines, and then you have this field of colors. Okay, whether it's drawing a nude or it's an abstract work, you could still see the influence of these two elements. Okay, the dynamic lines, the calligraphic lines, okay, and okay, the field of colors. Okay, and this is one of his work called Formation Series 33. Okay, actually, it's part of his Lotus series. Okay, Lotus seems to be an important symbol and motif, for some of these contemporary ink painters. But again, here, you can't, you can't see the Lotus itself, right? Okay, again, it has been dissolved into a series of dense ink and lines. Okay, right? Okay, so here is simply a kind of a play of the translucency, I suppose, the opaqueness, the strength, okay, of the ink, okay, and also the lines. Okay, and there are spatters of colors like red, green, okay, a bit of yellow, okay, as a you know, to provide a contrast, right? Okay, or even to subdue, right, the, you know, the dominating presence of the dark, dense ink, right? Okay, so this work is really I would say it's an abstract work, right? It was done in 1999, okay. This is even a more innovative work in terms of, I think, its composition. Very interesting composition, right? And it's also part of his kind of Lotus series, okay? Although, you know, we can, I mean, the form in the center, right, gives a hint of, you know, the shape of the lotus. I mean, here you can see that the lotus is undergoing a process of metamorphosis, right? Okay, the form is rather ambiguous and undefined, you know, right? And he has, you know, here he has concentrated everything in the middle, right, of the canvas, right? And you know, here he also used a very cool blue pigment, okay, to depict the lotus, okay, and also spatters of colors, right? You can see reds and yellows again, right, on a kind of a creamy, you know, surface. Now notice that he actually used oil. He didn't, you know, right, use ink. So he has moved away from using ink, but here he used oil. Okay, but again, it comes to that ink aesthetic, right? Do you think this work, okay, to you, has that ink aesthetic? Right? It does, huh? Some of you are nodding your head. No. Okay, some don't see the ink aesthetic. Right. Okay. I suppose I do. It's quite clear. For example, I suppose in especially that black kind of area over there, right? Okay. Right. I mean, that really, you know, try to replicate the kind of the dense ink you see, right, in some Chinese ink paintings. Okay. Right. And okay, and other parts of the painting maybe try to replicate the vague washes, okay, that you also see in a Chinese painting. All right. Okay, so that's Wong Keen for you. Again, a very experimental and very innovative painter, right? Not given enough, I suppose, recognition that, you know, he probably, you know, deserves. Okay, still very active today. Okay, in fact, there were shows recently on Wong Keen's work, especially his nude series. Okay, he has gone a little bit into figures today. All right, a few more to go, and next we have Hong Xuan. Okay, I don't know whether you've heard of Hong Xuan. In fact, I believe you know, he's represented by Ode to Art. Right, still is represented by Ode to Art. Okay, and he's an accomplished calligrapher. Okay, but he, again, you know, like some of the ink painters in China, he has gone beyond the kind of the traditional value of you know, of calligraphy. Okay, he used calligraphy in a sense as a formal and aesthetic value in his work. Right. Okay, and he also experimented with Western techniques and idiom. Okay, and I would say, like Henry Chen, he also kind of, you know, distilled everything, you know, ink, color, brush into essence of abstract forms. Right? Okay, but what's very interesting is that, you know, Hong Xuan, you know, still makes references to his Chinese roots. Okay. Okay, it probably isn't obvious in the, you know, in his paintings, but, you know, he does, you know, make a lot of references to Chinese art and culture. Okay, for example, to the frescoes in Dunhuang along the Silk Road. Okay, to the very rich patina you'll find on Chinese bronzes. You know, the greenish patina. okay, as the Bronze's Age, okay, to colors of Chinese ceramics like the Celadon, the green of the Celadon, right? Okay, to, you know, so, and even, you know, his calligraphy also is influenced to Chinese, you know, ideographs or ideograms, you know, whatever you call it, right? Okay, and right, so you can see all this in his work. Well, that's not Hong Juan's work, okay? That's Mark Roscoe, okay? I already showed you, you know, Jackson Pollock's work, okay? So this is another tendency in the abstract expressionist school, what you call the color field painting. Okay, it's called color field because they mainly work with fields of color, all right? Okay, so you have the background, okay, of blue, and then you have, normally in Rothko's work, you have about 2 or 3 kind of rectangular blocks, one on top of the other, right? And he also plays with the density and the luminosity of his work in terms of, you know, of his color, right? Okay, so you'll see, you'll find some connection between Rothko's work, okay, the color field painters and, you know, those of the contemporary ink painters, like Hong Juan, right? Okay, let's just, let me just show you his work. Okay, so some people have spoken about in terms of how Hong Juan used lines and how he used colors. Okay, someone has spoke about the sublime beauty in his work. Okay, that is able to evoke certain moods, certain emotions. Right? Now, I don't know here whether you can read too much into it, you know. Okay, whether it's a metaphor itself for nature. He says that moonlit night. Where's the moon? I don't see the moon there. Okay, but I don't know, can you see the sky, you know? Right, maybe the streaks of white there represents you know, nature's light, I'm not sure, okay, or the moon's light, you know, again, we're not sure, but, you know, what we can see here is just to appreciate the, you know, the formal beauty of this work. Okay, there is a blending of, you know, of colors, right, okay, and the way that, you know, he used the lines as well, okay, to integrate that with the, you know, the colors of his work. Okay, so here you can see that, you know, although the title hints at a descriptive subject like moon, right? We don't see it here because Hong Juan, again, as I mentioned, he has distilled everything, okay, into an abstract composition, right? Okay, here I think he has gone even further. I mean, okay, this is again a reference to, I would say, color field painting. Okay, so what you have here is he uses, I would say, 2 kind of shades of green, you know. Okay, but the title here says misty green. Okay, now misty green probably refers to that squarish green over there. Okay, you know, it's not juxtaposed against that larger field, but I think it's part of it. Right, it's part of it. It's like, you know, suddenly a fog appears in nature, right? Okay, and of course here he is also trying to play with our own, you know, optical illusion as well, right? In terms of how he, you know, he tried to contrast the 2 shades of green. Okay, but it's interesting how he also makes the edges of the square rather uneven and jagged. Okay, instead of just drawing, you know, an exact square, right? Okay, but having said that, you know, I think this slide doesn't do justice, you know, to all these works. You have to really see it person to, you know, to really appreciate the subtleties, you know, right? Okay, of the work, the colors and all that. Okay, so I have to qualify myself, right, to say that. Okay, I think two more artists to go. Lim Zeping, right? Everyone has heard of Lim Zeping. Oh yes, just next to me. How appropriate. Okay. Of course, you know, such works have not been typical of Lim Zeping. So, in a sense, I mean, the expressive brushstroke you see, you know, is quite characteristic of his work and all that. But colors, I think, is something I would say, you know, has not been a really integral part of his work. But he has introduced colors, you know, to his work, I think, in recent times. Okay, but of course, Lin Zeping today is the longest living artist in Singapore. I think he's 93, if I'm not mistaken, in his early 90s. Still very active, still practicing calligraphy every day, right? Okay, and maybe that's the secret to his long life, right? Okay. Okay, so Zeping, I would say, or you know, he's really a bridge between the modern period and the contemporary. Okay, so I suppose works like this, you know, he's trying to contemporarize his work in some ways, right? You know, because he have already mastered, I would say, you know, I mean, he's someone who has, I would not say maybe mastered, but you know, he has, you know, he's so much grounded in traditional, you know, Chinese ink and calligraphy that, you know, it came a point in his artistic career that he decided to be creative, right? Okay, and to be creative means to break the boundaries, okay, to push the boundaries of his medium, right? Okay, and you know, in his style, he always used the Xie style, okay, which is the more expressive freehand style, okay, which you know, enable him to record his paintings, right, with directness and immediacy. Okay, and you know, he was probably one of the few, if not the only artist to record old Singapore before he underwent modernization in the 1980s. Okay, you know how many paintings he did? Okay, just to, you know, to record his impression of old Singapore. You know, he would go to Chinatown. Those were his favorite haunts. Singapore River. Okay, he did altogether about 500 works. Okay, so these works are also known for their historical value as much as for their artistic value, right? And he said, you know, he wanted to capture, you know, Singapore before it, you know, totally disappeared. That's to say, old Singapore. All right. Okay, and so in some of these works, you know, in the 80s, you know, it shows a very keen eye for architectural details, right? Okay, but later on, you know, he abandoned simply imitating what he saw for a more expressive brushwork, right, and abstract representation. So I would say that as time went on, you know, his works became, you know, more abstract, more expressive, right? Okay, this is one of his works. I don't have the date of this work, okay, but it looks like old Chinatown to me. Do you think so? So this work, I mean, you see the street hawkers, right, along the, I mean, the hawkers on the street. So I suppose it was painted probably in the 80s. Okay, in fact, I got this work by, you know, from the Ode to Art website. Okay, so they have this work, so if you're interested, you know, I can talk to you. But I don't know whether this was painted in the 80s, you know, probably, yeah. It looks like old Chinatown to me. Okay, so you can see, you know, I mean, these are quite typical of his works in the 80s, where he tried to capture, you know, old buildings, right, people, right, in his very expressive and direct manner. And he says, the abstracted images in my painting evoke a sense of the contemporary in the viewer. That's interesting, right? As I said, there was an attempt, you know, again by him, gradually to contemporarize his work. Okay? But the use of ink and brush in them remains very much the same as before, which is essentially ancient and traditional. That's interesting. Okay? Artists like him remaining respectful. Okay? Of course, people like Wong Kim will say that, you know, they wanted to innovate and all that to break from the tyranny, the burden of tradition. Okay, but Lim Zeping still remains very respectful of tradition. Okay, of course, purists, you know, would be criticizing some of the works I show you because, you know, they say that they shouldn't even, you know, depart from that tradition. Okay. Okay. Wait, Lim Junjin. Oh no, it should be, sorry, it should be Lim Zeping. Right, Lim Junjin is the next one. Right. In the past number of years, his focus has been turned increasingly to calligraphy. Okay, I think there are a couple of works that used to be there. And he used a kind of a swift cursive style, right, of calligraphy. Okay, because to Lim Zeping, you know, he considered calligraphy to occupy a higher place in his art than painting. Okay, and he said that one actually influenced the other. Okay, when he writes, he says that impressions of painting began to form in his mind. Okay, and when he paints, he would think of how calligraphy can be integrated in his painting. Okay, so you see that, you know, so in his recent works, you know, what he did was he tried to fuse, you know, integrate these two, so much so that their boundaries have become blurred. Okay, and he called these works, you know, these freely expressive cursive works as muddled writing, right? Muddled writing. I'm sure he, you know, purists will criticize his you know, him for that, but you know, as he said himself, he's trying to be creative. Okay, he's not trying to be disrespectful of, you know, of tradition, but to be creative. Where is it? Oh, I have to move away. Is there one? Ah, right. Okay, I see. Yes, and this is another example here, okay, of what you call his muddled writing. Okay, a work that really, you know, you can't say that it's calligraphy, okay, neither can you say that, you know, it's just, you know, it's painting, but, you know, here he's trying to blur the boundaries between the two, right, calligraphy and painting, okay, so much so that, again, he has subverted the semantic value of calligraphy, right? I mean, if there are words at all, you know, I mean, his words here his characters are unreadable, right? Okay, we can only, you know, appreciate them at a more formal level, okay, rather than, you know, at a very linguistic or semantic level. Okay, so you can see how Lim Tze-Ping has been trying to push the you know, the boundaries of the tradition, and you know, trees have always held a fascination for him as well. Right, okay, he painted quite a number of trees, okay, and especially roots, roots, okay, and you know, in some of his work, he's tried to capture the roots, okay, because he considered, you know, the roots to be like the soul of the tree, right, and it's because also, you know, he finds that there's a lot of kind of similarity between, you know, drawing the tree, the roots, and calligraphy itself. Okay, so that's why drawing trees and, you know, the roots of the tree, okay, held a lot of significance for him. Okay, because of his, you know, alignment with calligraphy, right? Okay, but here I see that, you know, this work is a bit more Western and Chinese, right? Okay, it reminds me of, you know, some of the works of, you know, the Cubist style of painting, right? In terms of the fragmentation, right, of the you know, the composition, right? Okay, but again, as I said, the calligraphic line is unmistakable, right, in these works, right? Okay, two more to go. Two more very briefly, you know, artists. I don't think you've ever heard of Lim Chun Jin. And I think that, you know, artists like, you know, I always call him Mr. Lim, you know, as a form of respect. Okay, he's, I mean, and Chun Jin, you know, Lim Chun Jin, you know, currently he's teaching a course on Chinese ink, okay, in LaSalle, right? He conducts a workshop there, right? He's a very close friend of Chua A.K. Okay, and again, I feel that he's not been given enough recognition, okay, for his work, right? And he says, I mean, he's different from Henry Chen, right? Henry Chen would listen to music while he painted. Okay, here Lim Chun Jin said, if you paint following the rhythms of music, aren't you translating and replicating the music score of the composer into a visual medium? Okay, but of course he's saying that you shouldn't be listening to music while you paint, but you can still listen to music. And then later on when you paint, you know, it will kind of, you know, help you to interpret the painting itself, but you shouldn't, right, be listening to music while you paint. But that's actually his philosophical approach, right? So different artists have, right, different approaches, right? He paints nature and landscape, right? And integrates Western theoretical system and practices with Chinese ink and brush. And of course, I have to mention that he completed his master's in LaSalle. Okay, more than 6 years, more than 8 years ago, 9 years probably, right? Okay, or more. Okay, and I think, studying in LaSalle gives you that, as I said, that contemporary kind of, it helps you to think in terms of contemporary, right? And it can help to rejuvenate, in a sense, refresh, okay, the way you approach, right, painting. Sometimes it's a very conceptual way, okay, because at LaSalle we always emphasize, the conceptual aspects of making art, right? So I think sometimes, painters need to have that conceptual, push the conceptual aspects even more in their work. And he mentioned what you call accidental effects. These are his own words, right? Although I'm not very sure, I've not spoken to him about this, but about what he meant by accidental effects. But it's his attempt to move beyond the traditional. Now, it's not that he just maybe blindfold himself and then draw on the, on the canvas or the paper. But these accidental effects were actually consciously, right, created. Okay, it's an oxymoron in a way, right? In a sense, you can say that accidental, but then yet again consciously created, right? It's a paradox, but that's what he's, he says about his work. Okay. Okay, but there's always, although he follows certain methods, there's always an element of unpredictability. Okay, so I would say that there's a certain amount of chance and control in his work. Okay, right? Maybe you can say that that's one way of looking at his work. Okay, I'm going to just show you one of his work. Okay, quite different, huh? Quite different from some of the works we have seen. Okay, I suppose this is done Chinese ink on paper. Okay, and if you know Lim Chun Jin, okay, he's very much grounded as well in Chinese ink, okay, calligraphy, right? But here, again, he's trying to, right, to break the boundaries of Chinese ink painting, right? So here, although it says wetland in mangrove forest, can you see the mangrove forest? You can't. Okay, you can't see the roots of the mangrove trees, and okay, reminds me of a series of work compositions by Piet Mondrian, okay, one of the pioneer abstract artists, in his tree series, okay, done I think in 1910 to 1912, in which he distilled, right, his trees became increasingly abstract until they become a series of vertical and horizontal lines. Okay, so likewise here. Okay, I'm sure those lines that you see, okay, whether they are the horizontal or diagonal, okay, or vertical lines, okay, they are kind of an abstract, okay, representation of, right, the mangrove trees and forests. Okay, so Lim Chun Jin has, distilled everything to just a series of lines, right, in this work. Okay, right. So he has taken away representation altogether in this work. Right, and somehow I think in the overall aesthetic of this work, right, you can feel that, one can sense that kind of nature, the kind of natural, qualities in this work, right? Perhaps in a way that he handled the brush, right, in this work. Okay. And lastly, Hong Sek-chuen, okay. I have to include her because she's also quite an important artist. Okay, and really, of all the artists, I've shown, she's the one who really, perhaps, with the exception maybe of 8K, right, try to really break away from, the tradition of Chinese ink. Okay, now Hong Sek-chuen, instead of landscapes, she preferred to paint urbanscapes. Okay, so these are urbanscapes. Right. She won the 2007 UOB, prestigious UOB award, right, for one of her ink works. Okay, so you can see that she paints mainly using Chinese ink, right, on paper. Okay, but her works are known also for their skill and for their monumental skill. Okay, and for a very distinctive style as well, right? And in this work, you'll see, I mean, there are a few things that you'll notice, right? Is that she's very interested in buildings, okay, but in a very different way that Lim Tze-ping or Chua Ek Kay will be interested in a building, okay. So here she's not only concerned or interested in the facade or the exterior of the building, but also the interior spaces. Okay, but you can see that in a work, interior and exterior are never clearly defined, right? In this work, okay. In a sense, she's collapsing both interior and exterior places, right? And and again, there's no one viewpoint. In a work, there are multiple viewpoints. Right? So much so that sometimes her work can appear upside down or sideways, right? Okay, and also notions of time and space. Okay, notions of time and space are what you call subverted here, destabilized. Okay, because what happens is that although this work doesn't comprise a single building, okay, but many a few buildings, as you can see, and interior spaces, right? But she's kind of collapsed them, right, into a kind of a single image, right? Okay, so much so that you don't so much so that time and space becomes destabilized, right? Okay, in this work, okay, and she combines often in her work also. Buildings, not just from one time or one culture, okay, but from different countries, okay. Right. So her work here is, a composite, I would say, but also, she's striving for a certain unity as well, right, in this work. Okay. So very interesting approach, right, to making drawings of buildings. Okay, and her works have often been compared to an architect's, sketches of buildings, in that she also used what they call construction lines, okay, blocks and lines, to depict the, her buildings. Right. Okay, I'm done. Okay, thank you for coming. Okay.